December 26, 1944, near Bastogne, Belgium. Just before dawn. The forest is silent in the way only winter war zones are silent. No birds, no wind, just breath crystallizing in the dark. A German soldier presses his face into the snow, fingers numb inside thin gloves that were never meant for this cold. Somewhere ahead, an American machine gun chatters once, twice, then stops. Orders crackle in English. Boots crunch closer. He is 19 years old. Moments later, his rifle is gone. His helmet follows. A white cloth, maybe a torn undershirt, rises shakily above the tree line. The Battle of the Bulge is still raging, but for him, the war has just ended. Not fear, just the hollow shock of survival. Within hours, he is one of thousands. They move in columns, muddy, exhausted, stunned past burning villages and wrecked armor. Some are Wehrmacht veterans hardened by years of fighting. Others are barely out of school, rushed into uniform as Germany's manpower collapsed. Teenagers exist among them, yes, but they are rare, swallowed by a sea of men in their 20s and 30s. No speeches, no threats, just orders. Hands up, move. By nightfall, they are processed. Names taken, tags clipped. The Americans are brisk, professional. The prisoners are searched, fed, guarded. And then something strange happens. They are put on trucks. Not toward the front. Not toward a camp in Europe. Days blur together. Temporary enclosures. Barbed wire fields. The sound of aircraft overhead constant, overwhelming. Eventually, the prisoners are marched up a steel ramp into the belly of a ship. The ocean swells beneath them. Hatches close. For many, it is their first time at sea. The Atlantic crossing is cold, cramped, and terrifying. Seasickness mixes with rumor. America. Someone whispers. Another scoffs. Nazi propaganda had painted the United States as brutal, racially chaotic, starving under capitalist collapse. No one knows what to believe. Weeks later, the ship slows. Palm trees, southern accents, white-painted barracks behind wire. The men blink in the sunlight. They have crossed an ocean they were told they would never see. By 1943, the United States is already deep into a logistical problem no one had fully anticipated. German prisoners are surrendering in numbers that dwarf World War I North Africa, Italy, France, the Ardennes. Entire units collapse. By war's end, over 425,000 German prisoners of war will be held in the United States, spread across more than 700 camps in 46 states. And quietly, almost improbably, Oklahoma becomes one of the centers of this invisible war. Trains carry prisoners inland, days of rattling steel and guarded platforms, curtains drawn. Eventually, one train slows near eastern Oklahoma. The land opens up, rolling hills, pine and oak. Nothing like Europe. A sign flashes past the window. Near the towns of Braggs and Muskogee, the camp rises from the landscape rows of wooden barracks, watchtowers, perimeter fencing that glints under the sun. Originally built as a U.S. Army training base, it has been repurposed for a new mission: holding the enemy. From May 1943 to June 1946, Camp Gruber will house thousands of German POWs. At its peak, it becomes part of a vast Oklahoma network, roughly 20,000 to 22,000 German prisoners across 8 major camps and dozens of branch sites. As the prisoners disembark, guards count, doctors inspect, orders are translated. The men expect beatings, starvation, revenge. Instead, They are assigned bunks. The barracks are simple wooden frames, pot-bellied stoves, rows of cots, but they are dry, clean, structured. Each man receives food rations equal to those issued to American soldiers, as required by the Geneva Convention: bread, meat, coffee. Some stare at the plates in disbelief. For prisoners who remember Germany in 1944 bombed out cities, ration cards, watery soup, this feels unreal. A few suspect a trick. Others eat in silence, ashamed of their hunger. Outside the wire, Oklahoma stretches endlessly. Cotton fields, farms, dirt roads disappearing into heat shimmer. The war feels impossibly far away. Soon, work details begin. Under guard, prisoners march out to pick cotton, repair roads, maintain the base. They are paid a small wage camp scrip, about 80 cents a day money that can be spent at the camp canteen on soap, snacks, writing paper. It is not freedom. But it is not what they were promised by Berlin. At night, whispers fill the barracks about home, about Stalingrad, about whether Germany still exists at all. Some men cling fiercely to Nazi ideology. Others begin, quietly, to doubt. And among them, barely noticed at first, are a handful of very young faces. 17, 16, one might even be 15. Conscripted late, captured fast, now half a world away from the cities where they learned to march. They listen more than they speak. They watch everything. Because something is happening here, in this place, that was never meant to matter. Something slow, subtle, dangerous to old beliefs. And it hasn't even begun yet. Morning comes early at Camp Gruber. A whistle cuts through the damp Oklahoma air, sharp and unavoidable. Boots hit wooden floors. Men sit up on narrow cots, blinking into a day that feels almost civilian. Barbed wire casts long shadows across the ground, reminders that this peace has limits. Roll call, counted in German, counted again in English. The guards are alert but not cruel. Most are older soldiers or men unfit for overseas combat. They carry rifles, yes, but they also carry newspapers, thermoses, boredom. This is not the front. This is a holding pattern. The prisoners fall into routines. German soldiers, once trained for blitzkrieg, now bend under the sun, hands raw from labor. Others repair roads, drain ditches, or perform maintenance on the sprawling base. It is hard work, honest work. And for it, they are paid. 80 cents a day doesn't sound like much, but inside the wire, it buys dignity. Soap, razor blades, chocolate bars, stationery. Some prisoners save their scrip carefully, as if it still belongs to a future that might exist. Meals become the day's emotional anchor. The food is American military standard meat, bread, vegetables, coffee. It is filling, consistent. For men who remember ration cards and empty markets back home, it is quietly shocking. You can almost hear the thoughts they don't dare speak. Why do our enemies eat better than our families? Soccer fields appear on open ground, marked out with chalk and hope. Matches draw crowds, laughter breaking through accents. Chessboards sit under trees, some men lift makeshift weights. Others read German-language newspapers, printed specifically for POWs, carefully monitored, but still real. Then there is the theater. Inside a repurposed building, prisoners rehearse plays, comedies, dramas, satirical sketches that toe the line of what guards will tolerate. Costumes are improvised, scripts are shared. Applause fills the room on performance nights, echoing off wooden walls. It is surreal. At Camp Gruber, the prisoners even published their own newsletter, the Camp Gruber Zeitung. Typed, edited, distributed within the camp. It contains announcements, essays, poems, reflections on daily life. Nothing overtly political, but deeply human. Words have a way of sneaking past fences. Some prisoners throw themselves into these activities with relief. Others refuse. The ideological hardliners men still loyal to Hitler, even in defeat, watch with suspicion. They form their own social circles, enforcing loyalty through intimidation. This is where tension lives now. Not between guard and prisoner, but between prisoner and prisoner. At night, whispers return. Arguments break out over Germany's future, over blame, over whether defeat was inevitable or betrayed. Older soldiers talk of exhaustion. Younger ones listen, absorbing cracks in a worldview they were taught was unbreakable. And among them, those very young prisoners feel it most sharply. They had been fed certainty. Marching songs, flags, simple answers. Now they are surrounded by contradictions. American guards who don't beat them. Black soldiers wearing U.S. uniforms, something Nazi ideology insisted could not exist. Newspapers reporting Allied victories without collapse or chaos. Endless supplies. Open land. Calm. The propaganda doesn't survive first contact with reality. Still, the camp is not utopia. Barbed wire hums faintly in the wind. Watchtowers loom. Escape attempts are rare and almost always pointless. Where would you go? Oklahoma might as well be another planet. When escape does happen, it usually ends with a hungry, exhausted prisoner turning himself in at a farmhouse. Punishment is firm but measured. Life inside the wire teaches a dangerous lesson. The enemy is human. Then, in 1944, something changes. Posters appear on bulletin boards. Announcements are read aloud. Attendance is encouraged, sometimes mandatory. Classes, English lessons, American history, civics, discussions about government, law, and individual rights. Words like democracy and responsibility are repeated until they lose their foreignness. At first, many prisoners scoff. A few refuse outright. Then the films begin. Documentary footage from Europe. Black and white images projected onto whitewashed walls. Camps, corpses, starving survivors. Evidence that cannot be argued away. The room goes silent. Some men look down. Some turn away. A few walk out in anger. Others sit frozen, confronted for the first time with crimes committed in the name of a nation they served. This is not propaganda. This is exposure. The United States Army calls it re-education. The prisoners call it something else entirely. A reckoning, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. Because after this, after the work, the plays, the meals, the films, going home will never mean going back to who they were. And home is coming. The room smells of dust and hot projector bulbs. Folding chairs scrape softly as men settle in, some curious, some wary, some openly hostile. A U.S. officer stands near the door, arms crossed, saying nothing. The projector whirs to life. The film begins without music. Barbed wire, watchtowers, faces so thin they barely resemble faces at all. The images are unrelenting. Corpses stacked like firewood, survivors staring into the lens with hollow eyes. Piles of shoes, numbers tattooed into skin. A voice explains in German where this footage was taken, when, by whom. No one speaks. These screenings happen across the United States POW system, including Oklahoma. Sometimes attendance is voluntary. Sometimes it is not. Either way, the effect is the same. Now the evidence flickers 10 feet away. Some prisoners explode in denial. They shout that it is staged, that it is exaggerated, that Germany would never do this. Others sit perfectly still, as if motion might shatter something inside them. The youngest prisoners struggle the most. Many had never left Germany before being thrown into combat. Now, in a quiet Oklahoma room, they are asked to reconcile loyalty with atrocity. There is no easy path out. After the screenings, discussion follows. American officers lead some sessions. In others, German émigrés men who fled Nazi rule years earlier speak calmly, deliberately, in familiar accents. They talk about how democracies fail, how they survive, how obedience becomes complicity. Even fellow prisoners sometimes stand up and speak. Teachers, lawyers, students who had been silenced back home but now find space to think aloud. Not everyone listens. Hardline Nazis attempt to disrupt classes. They whisper threats, accuse others of betrayal. The camp administration responds by separating ideological extremists, sometimes transferring them to different camps. The wire holds more than bodies now. It holds ideas and conflict. Outside the classrooms, life continues. Work details, soccer matches, theater rehearsals. Letters from home grow darker, cities destroyed, families displaced, fathers missing. Then, in May 1945, the news arrives. Germany has surrendered. There is no ceremony inside Camp Gruber, no celebration. Just a quiet announcement. Some men sit down heavily. Others stare into the distance. A few cry out of relief, grief, or something they can't name. The war they were sent to fight is over. But captivity is not. Under the Geneva Convention, prisoners must be repatriated, but not immediately. Logistics take time. Europe is shattered. Transport ships are scarce. Camps remain active. And now, something unexpected happens. Some prisoners don't want to leave. They gather in small groups at night, talking in low voices. Eastern Germans worry about returning to Soviet-controlled zones. Rumors of forced labor, political purges, vanished neighbors. Others have no homes left at all. Just addresses that no longer exist. A few men begin writing petitions. Careful, respectful letters asking if they can stay. They cite work skills, family connections, fear of persecution, hope for a different life. The answer is almost always no. Policy is policy. First, they must go home, but the seed has been planted. Tools are turned in. The Camp Gruber Zeitung prints its final issues. Before leaving, some prisoners do something strange. They build brick drainage canals, small monuments, carefully constructed stonework that serves no military purpose. Quiet acts of craftsmanship left behind on land that was never theirs. Traces. By June 1946, Camp Gruber closes as a POW camp. The wire comes down. The land returns to military training use, eventually becoming National Guard property. The prisoners are gone, because in the years that follow long after uniforms are burned and passports reissued, thousands of former German POWs will find their way back to the United States, not as enemies, as immigrants. How did captivity change them more than freedom ever could? The ship docks quietly. There is no cheering crowd, no flags, just cranes creaking, gulls circling, and men standing at the rail, staring at a coastline that feels both familiar and foreign. Europe looks smaller somehow, damaged, as if the war has physically shrunk it. They disembark in waves, former prisoners, former soldiers, former believers in a world that no longer exists. For some, the journey home takes weeks. Trains crawl through shattered rail networks. Stations are half ruined. Cities appear through windows like open wounds, roofs torn away, walls blackened by fire, entire neighborhoods flattened into gray dust. Germany in 1945 is not a nation. It is a landscape of absence. Millions of displaced people wander roads with carts and suitcases, searching for relatives who may already be dead. The former POWs arrive carrying memories that don't fit this place. They remember Oklahoma sunlight, regular meals, order, guards who followed rules, classes where questions were allowed. They remember abundance while their families starved. Some keep these memories secret. Others speak and are met with disbelief, resentment, or anger. How could you have lived well while we suffered? The accusation hangs heavy. Survival itself becomes something to apologize for. For those from Eastern Germany, the return is even harsher. Soviet occupation brings new authorities, new interrogations, new fears. Former Wehrmacht soldiers are viewed with suspicion. Some are sent to labor camps. Others vanish into bureaucratic shadows. Men who survived captivity under their enemy now feel imprisoned at home. And yet life moves forward. Years pass. The ruins slowly clear. New governments form. Borders harden. The world reshapes itself without asking permission. Letters begin crossing the Atlantic. Former POWs write to American guards they remembered, to farmers they worked for, to teachers who challenged them. They ask about sponsorships, immigration laws. In the late 1940s and especially the 1950s, thousands of former German POWs legally immigrate to America. They arrive not as prisoners, but as workers, students, husbands, fathers. Many settle in the Midwest. Some return to states they once saw from behind wire: Texas, Ohio, Oklahoma. They take jobs in factories, farms, engineering firms. They join churches, raise children who speak English without accents. When asked why they came, a common answer emerges. They speak of fairness, of predictability, of being treated as human beings even in defeat. Not perfection, not kindness without limits, but rules that applied to everyone. For some, it is the most unsettling lesson of all. Back in Oklahoma, Camp Gruber fades from public memory. The barracks are removed. The wire disappears. Training exercises replace guard towers. Nature reclaims much of the land. But not everything vanishes. Brick drainage canals still cut through the earth laid carefully by German hands. Small stone markers remain, unnoticed by most who passed them. The war ended. It forced reflection. And reflection, once begun, does not stop at the gate. Years later, a man stands at the edge of a training field in eastern Oklahoma. He is old now. His hair thin, his posture careful. Around him, National Guard units move through exercise, radios crackling, boots striking dirt, helicopters thundering overhead. No one notices him. There is no marker to announce why he has come. He looks down at the ground. Beneath the grass, the lines are still there. Brick drainage channels laid with patience and precision more than 80 years earlier. His hands remember the weight of those bricks, the rhythm of the work. The quiet conversations in a language that once defined him. He was not a hero. He was not a victim. He was a prisoner. Between 1942 and 1946, More than 425,000 German POWs lived inside the United States, fed, guarded, studied, observed. In Oklahoma alone, tens of thousands passed through camps like Camp Gruber, carrying with them the collapse of an ideology and the burden of what came after. They arrived as enemies shaped by propaganda. They left as witnesses to contradiction. Some rejected what they saw. Others absorbed it slowly, painfully. A few never forgave themselves for how long it took to understand. But history does not measure transformation in absolutes. It measures it in choices. The choice to listen. The choice to question. The choice to build something instead of destroying it. The presence of teenage soldiers in these camps, real but rare, adds a final layer of tragedy. Boys rushed into uniforms at the end of a dying regime, captured before they fully understood what they were fighting for, then forced to confront its crimes from half a world away. They were part of the cost. The greater truth is quieter and more unsettling. America did not defeat these men inside the wire with violence. It defeated certainty by showing abundance instead of scarcity, process instead of chaos, law instead of impulse. That irony, so often noted in POW memoirs, remains one of World War II's least discussed weapons. When the former prisoners returned decades later as immigrants, they carried that lesson with them. They built lives, raised families, became Americans not because they forgot the war, but because they remembered what captivity taught them. And today, most people drive past Camp Gruber without knowing any of this. They see fields, forest, training grounds. They do not see the ghosts of young men staring at Oklahoma sunsets, wondering how the world they were promised collapsed so completely, and how the enemy they feared showed them another way to live. History is not only written in battles. Sometimes it is written in barracks, in classrooms, in silence.